everybody. It's time for Februllage. Every day of the month, Instagram gives us a prompt and we create a collage from it. Some of these collages made it into videos on the channel, but every day we created something. Stay tuned and I'll show you what I made. Bubble Bauble is the first collage of the Februllage journey and uses a technique I fall back on often, removing the features of a model and building a new face. She is also part of a video compilation, Collage on the Fly. Bubble Bauble garnered the most likes on Instagram, a good way to start any creative challenge. There are two versions of the second prompt for Postcard. I liked the original collage I built, but felt that it didn't comply well with the prompt. The second version is a hybrid of digital and analog. The only part of the posted version that is analog is the focal point. Which do you prefer, the original or the posted version? For the prompt escape, I focused on things we do when we are trying to get away from the stressors of life. Some coping mechanisms are healthy, while others are questionable. This piece also ended up with its own video, which will be linked in the description. Which elements of escape do you see in this piece? Here's another hybrid of analog and digital collage for the prompt of warmth. I relied heavily on digital means primarily as a time saver. But the best time saver truly is just keeping the collages simple. My method for minimal collaging comes in handy for Februllage. Only 3 pieces of ephemera were used for this prompt, and it was one of my favorites so far. The encounter prompt was kind of hard at first, but what makes it hard is that I am thinking too much. When I stop thinking, the work seems to figure itself out. There is an element of control that comes with art making, and it has to be balanced with allowing ourselves to fall into a zone and trusting the process. Chance Encounter also garnered its own video and reinstated the belief that I need to keep it simple and stay away from too many focal points. Link to this video in the description. Oh, and for reference, here is my first attempt at Encounter, which I didn't care for at all. Again, which do you prefer? Treasure was another prompt that got me thinking too much. I was fixated on finding the image of a treasure chest, but you all know how that goes. The very thing you're looking for won't reveal itself until you don't need it. The focal point of this piece was a small picture in a magazine that I normally would not utilize. Is she the true focal point, or is it the chalice she's drinking from? Or maybe it's the erstwhile unicorn that sits dutifully by her side? What do you think? The idea for this collage came to me the morning I needed to build it. Of course, Andy Warhol and his pastel panels of the iconic Marilyn Monroe pummeled my psyche. What also pummeled and tested me was making this piece entirely digital. It was exhausting. Digital collage is an area I am still very much neophyte, and this piece took longer than I wanted, but ultimately, I was happy with the end product. I ran into a bit of a snafu and got my Februllage prompts mixed up. I tried to stay at least one day ahead and thought I had done so, except I bypassed the ladder prompt and didn't realize it until I was scrolling and saw other collages doing a prompt for ladder. I was pleased with the image I scored from a National Geographic, and like the treasure prompt, the focal point was a small image. It wasn't quite a ladder, but I decided to go with it due to time constraints and also taking artistic license with the interpretation of ladder. With minimals, the background is almost as important as the focal point. This background was also used in another favorite collage called The Other Half, which is seen here. There are 2 versions for Wrong Way, and yes, I did try to find an image of a wrong way sign to no avail. I like both pieces and ultimately posted both on Instagram. This end up is highly absurd and kind of reminds me of the movie poster for the 1972 film MASH. I'm not quite confident that it speaks to the wrong way prompt, but it was my favorite collage of the 2. Which one is yours? I had a lot of fun with this prompt, Tangle, and its title, Practice to Deceive, which is a literary reference not to Shakespeare, but to Scottish poet Sir Walter Scott and his epic romance poem Marion. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. This collage enlisted some of my favorite elements, a black and white image coupled with color. I went with a tangle of a pearl necklace to observe the prompt. I continued to play with titles as they may apply to the prompt. In this case, I took a bit of lyrics from a system of a down song toxicity and went from there. Lots of different ephemera at play here: books, bride magazines, and tattoo illustrations. I got lucky during some cleaning and unearthed an old box of collages that I created as part of an art collaboration in 2014. I built collages based on the United States, and here is the one for Oregon. A lot of vintage materials went into each piece, and this one is no exception. I had to fall back on that little collection, as you will see soon enough. The title is Remember Oregon, and the prompt was Remember. A disclaimer: the prompt was wolf, but the animal in this collage was actually a coyote. Here in Los Angeles County, coyotes are part of the landscape and a way of life. They actually do a good job keeping the rodent population at bay, but you must be watchful for your pets. The coyotes here in LA are also hybrids of wolves, so people, when first seeing them, often mistake them for wolves. I can attest to that. For this collage, we are going back to 2020, when I was experimenting with more sustainable ways to create. This piece was created on the bed of a scanner, the ephemera placed carefully until I was satisfied with the result. The image only exists in digital form, since after it was scanned, the pieces were separated. It's a good way to use imagery multiple times, and a technique I have not explored since then. Sometimes my schedule grows a bit crazy, and I rely on past collages to help me fulfill my Februllage obligations. Such was the case with the prompt Dream and the post of Spun Sugar. Link to that video will be in the description. It's a sweet, fun little piece that I feel spoke well to the prompt. It was a real busy week. This was the fourth collage from my archives, and it hasn't gotten any love or attention since it was made for the same show that Remember Oregon came from. The prompt was play, and what does one do in Nevada but play? Lots of cool old vintage imagery from a Life magazine and some assemblage pieces too, like the wooden nickel in the upper right-hand corner. I was really looking forward to this prompt sculpture because I found an old humanities textbook that was chock full of great sculptural images, and it did not disappoint. However, I know I want to use them again, so everything was taped onto the background, and I can easily lift it later for other projects. The title Swipe Right pokes fun at the online dating vernacular of swiping right in search of the perfect person. For cardboard, I decided to take the easy way out and use a small piece of cardboard as substrate and background. This collage also helped me clean up my art studio a bit, since all the ephemera were scraps from other collages. I considered using my collage plates for the prompt, but I really wanted to create something new, and time was not a factor. The title of this piece is Fun with Zeus and Hera. I wanted to keep this collage simple because I didn't want it to come out as fake. Nonetheless, I went the plastic surgery route, which isn't fair because that is a personal decision and I haven't had any myself yet. Still, I liked the premise, and that was the idea, and I ran with it, and here's what I came up with. The title, So Fake, harkens back to when I was in high school in the 80s, and that was one of only many snarky phrases we used about people and things. I welcome 2024 in with this hybrid analog digital piece, originally prompted by the Absurdist Collage Club on Instagram. Again, it alleviated a bit of scheduling pressure as well as completing the Februllage assignment for the prompt Shadow and its title Upside Down. I worked on this prompt on the President's Day holiday, which was a day off from work. Truth be told, that can be dangerous for my creativity. As I have shared before, best laid plans aren't the norm and don't lend themselves well to collaging. I had an idea I wanted to go with, images and everything, and nothing worked out. The focal point was weak, and nothing was lining up. And the true bottom line, I didn't like it, and I didn't think it was coming out good. So I deviated and kept it simple, coming up with this guy. Originally, I was taking the Icarus route, but we all know what happened to him. I also relied on digital tools because the wings, for example, needed to be turned to be a mirror image of the other. I only had the one set of wings to work with, so digital was necessary. I'm happy to report my Photoshop skills are getting better. This is the river that flows in front of the Taj Mahal in India. That iconic structure cannot be ignored and was needed for this prompt, which I'll admit was troublesome because initially I just wasn't feeling the prompt of river. That happens and it sometimes makes the challenge tedious, but I am always surprised by what I come up with. This is also where cutting things apart really works. The female focal point was originally intact, but just not that interesting, so I detached the piece to make it look like she was either emerging or submerging into the river. Also, I liked the piece more on the computer screen, and I'm not sure why. In case you did not know, a crowd of giraffes are called towers. I've played with giraffe imagery before, like in this video, towers. You may notice that my landscapes are becoming more absurd, and I'm using a lot less material. So these are really turning into minimal collages. Also, with this Februllage, I found myself playing a lot more with digital. Initially, I attempted to do that with this piece. While both the giraffes in the foreground of Times Square, New York, came from analog books and magazines, I tried to erase the backgrounds and fuse them together in Photoshop. But I am very much a neophyte with digital still, though I am better than I used to be, that's for sure. I ended up cutting out the giraffes, scanning them, and the Times Square's foreground, and played with the background colors in Photoshop. This piece was done on a work night, which always yields interesting results, kind of like the prompts I don't really feel. I think it's due to having limited time. You need to go to bed early, and collage always fuels me to go late into the night. I wasn't crazy about the patron saint of the middle class, but when I got up at 5 a.m. and saw the finished piece, I always go with my knee-jerk reaction after a good night's sleep, and I liked it. I think what has inspired me so much with Februllage is how so many people all over the world are interpreting these prompts. The variety is exciting. There seems to be a new theme forming in my work, fictional patron saints. Back in November of 2023, I built this collage entitled The Patron Saint of Now. For me, saints are friendly conduits to a greater power. The prompt Capitalism brought forth the patron saint of the middle class. In this collage, my austere focal point wears a halo of jewels while holding a simple chicken and apples. A gold coin and a piggy bank hide behind him as a reminder that being middle class means watching your pennies but indulging in the occasional luxury. The prompt song reminded me of the title of the Walt Whitman poem, Song of Myself. I tweaked that to accommodate my own title, Song of Self. I utilized the tucking technique to bolster the illusion that the musician was in the middle of a golden field. Only 2 pieces of ephemera were used. Adding anything else I felt would steal from the collage's aesthetic. The prompt spill was not easy because it invoked memories of oil spills and the ensuing suffering that follows. Fortunately, some great spill collages address that very issue, like this stunning piece by Katherine Clara Art. Please check her out on Instagram in the link below and in the description. Now, somewhere in my ephemeral heap lies a vintage ad for Heinz ketchup, and of course I couldn't find it for this prompt, but my stalwart 1961 Life magazine came through once more. I relied heavily on my fledgling Photoshop skills to make the whipped cream appear foggy while maintaining its recognizable sugary fluff. The prompts that stumped me most somehow always became my favorites. Like this prompt for, you guessed it, favorite. My favorite dancing partner, of a whirling dervish from the cover of a 1994 National Geographic, plays with the absurd, since dervishes dance in an attitude of meditation, not with partners. I added Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man as a celestial element because the constant turning of the dervishes is thought to represent the orbiting of the planets through the universe. Interpretations abound when it comes to Februllage. After all, the prompt only serves as a fuse to ignite the spark. For Plaster, I immediately went to the old nursery rhyme of Jack and Jill, and the little known stanza that followed. Up Jack got, and home he did trot as fast as he could caper, went to bed and plastered his head with vinegar and brown paper. As a kid, that baffled me, but apparently vinegar and brown paper helped with bruising back in the day. I took that notion for my plaster theme and utilized a newly acquired vintage first aid guide. I also played with the very 1980s term of getting plastered along with a psychedelic background. By the way, stay tuned for a collage video featuring that cool little first aid book and a lot more that came in the kit. Februllage got an extra day with 2024 being a leap year. This is the second to the last collage. In my searches for other ephemera, I came upon a lovely pair of curtains in a vintage home magazine. But while it is a prompt, I realized the curtains I chose would only stand as a framing element and not a focal point. I had to crank this collage out on a work night, and again relied on Photoshop for help. I liked the way it came together, and also the name it ended up with. Beyond Infinity is Oblivion. The once every 4 years phenomena, February's extra day of the 29th is here, and the prompt is extra. While I had vivid visions of newspaper hawkers, in the end, these ballerinas made the cut. They originally were collected as possibilities for the curtain prompt. I will admit this collage was built after a very long work day, and I didn't have much hope for it. I just didn't have it in me to do any real fussy cutting, especially with the ballerina line, and the paper for the ballerinas was not the best quality. The prompts offer room for compromise, so I went to work. My ephemera is 99.9% from an analog source that I collect, but I have afforded myself elbow room to use Photoshop more judiciously, which I found myself doing a lot during this challenge, and it was a veritable lifesaver. Which leads me to believe either Photoshop is becoming more user-friendly or I'm evolving into a digital collagist. Just kidding, cut and paste is my main media. I am not abandoning it, but I can include Photoshop in my collage toolbox. Well, there you have it, another Februllage in the books. It's truly becoming an event, and I thank you for joining me on this collage journey, but let me know, which one was your favorite? Drop a note in the comments, and I'll see you next week.